Ibra di testa, Tonali, gol! Sandro! Meritato! Sandro! Gol!
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the SempreMilan Podcast. I'm your host, Ollie Fisher, joined by Lorenzo today as the co-host.
Hello guys, we're absolutely suffering this heat, but we're getting through it in the UK.
Just about. We're not used to these temperatures at all. Spent a good 5 minutes there before recording talking about how insufferable this weather is, but here we are. And we are delighted to have a very special guest on board, Adam Summerton, who is a commentator for BT Sport. A lot of you English Serie A fans, shall we say, will probably know you as the voice of Serie A. You're who we hear when we put the games on, and we hope to hear you shouting about many Milan goals. It doesn't always happen that way, but last season it certainly happened a fair few times. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us on this episode.
Thank you for inviting me on.
So when I was sort of trying to set this up, I was saying to you before that I studied sports journalism at university, and part of that we had a go at commentary as sort of a bit of a, well, they threw us in the deep end and said commentate over this segment of a match, and I think it was like a Crystal Palace v Chelsea FA Cup game from some time ago, and I realised how ridiculously difficult it is, and that put an end to my very slim hopes of becoming a football commentator. But what I wanted to know is how did you get into it? Is it something that you always wanted to do, or did you just kind of gravitate into it? Did things align for you to do what you're doing now?
I wouldn't say that I always planned to get into specifically commentary. I always wanted to work in the sports media. I thought I would end up as a sports writer, but I had a little bit of experience within a newspaper, not actually on the journalistic side, but actually sort of more on the advertising side. But it allowed me to see the workings of a newspaper. And I just, having seen it, felt I'm not quite as sure that this is for me. So looked to go down the broadcast route, did a 3-year degree in broadcast journalism. And it was in my first job, really, my first permanent job after I'd graduated, where it was a small local radio station and you had to kind of muck in with everything. So you would news reads, you would read the sports news, you would go out and interview people, you would present shows. It was a really good grounding. And one of the things that they kind of nudged me into really was commentary. It wasn't something that I really thought I would be any good at, if I'm honest. But the boss there just obviously thought differently and thought that it was worth having a go at. And the first game I did was Cambridge United against Mansfield Town in 2003. And it was a harem scarum type game. Mansfield won 2-1. They finished the game with 9 players. The police were on the pitch at the end being confronted by Keith Curl. It was just mad. And I just loved the chaos of it, really. And I loved flying by the seat of my pants. And I suppose I was bitten by the bug really there from that day on in terms of commentary. And I think from that moment on, I sort of knew that was where I wanted to go. But it was a really lengthy process, really, to go from that moment, which was in 2003, to where I suppose that I went full time as a commentator. It was probably around, I would have thought, sort of 2014, 2015, that kind of time, because it just took time to build up a reputation and a body of clients where I could just do that, because I was also... so it meant working 7-day weeks at times, because I would do football at weekends and work in newsrooms during the week. So it was a long process, a long way to get to that point. But yeah, that was eventually where I arrived. Yeah.
Yeah. Funny you mentioned Mansfield Town 2003. My local team, my English team, Huddersfield, and we were in a few battles with them that season. We played them in the final at the Millennium Stadium.
I was there.
I remember. Well, yeah. Lee Fowler scored the winning penalty. I remember Keith Curl having a reputation for having a bit of a temper. I'm not surprised to hear that at all. And then, sort of, how did you then go from, as you say, sort of building up a portfolio of work to sort of where you're at now, BT Sport, doing Serie A, and with Serie A, did you always have a bit of a sort of background liking for Italian football, should we say? Is that something that you wanted to go into, or was it more that that's where the work took you?
Well, I'm from the sort of 90s generation who grew up on Football Italia and watching James and Co and Gazza and people like that broadcasting. So that was my first introduction to Serie A when my mum and dad didn't have Sky. So we couldn't watch the Premier League on a Sunday. So we'd sit down and I can smell the roast dinner cooking almost if I sort of go back in time and remember watching some really good Italian football. And that was the place to be at the time. Serie A was, I suppose similar to the way the Premier League attracts the majority of the best players. I mean, you could take it up another notch actually to where Serie A was at the time. It was just the collection of all the best players. It was like a window to another footballing world, really, watching Serie A. So that was my first real introduction to it. And I think that whilst I always retained an interest, I can't say that I followed it avidly up until the point where BT launched and got the rights and I started doing it again, but I always retained an interest. But when they got the rights and I started doing Italian football for a job, I was commentating on it, then of course, your interest in it is raises massively because you're researching about it every day and you develop an affinity for I think that was sort of revived within me, that affinity for the league and the teams. And so for the last decade, basically, I've been really full on with Serie A. And I guess in terms of how I got to this point, I suppose that what I did really was building up over the number of years. You'd go from doing things like local radio to regional radio. Then I would do club TV stations, things like Everton and Wigan and Portsmouth. I did like their club TV type stuff. Then I did world feeds type commentaries. It's a very, very gradual process of doing radio and TV and sort of switching between the two disciplines and working your way up really and gaining a reputation, hopefully, and getting bigger and bigger gigs as things go on. And then luckily for me, the timing was great really because I had I built up a fair degree of experience. And I was ready to kind of move on to a higher level when BT launched nearly a decade ago now in 2013. And that was, I think I'll always look back on that was the biggest point really in my career because it just took me, BT Sport launching was just perfect for me. It's been, I love the place. It's been fantastic for me career wise. And the launch of it, as I say, the timing of it, where in terms of where I was in my development, how old I was, it couldn't have been better, really. And I've just tried to climb the ladder there ever since, I suppose, whilst working elsewhere as well.
I think it's a good point that about BT Sport and them sort of launching at the right time. And I think that sort of us as English fans of Italian football feel the same about them getting the rights because without naming them, let's just say who had it previously, I don't think they did a great justice to the product that was on offer. There were no build up to games or anything like that. And now the Golazzo live show that we get before every big game on a weekend, and just generally, I think BT are doing a great job with covering Serie A. And
thanks.
And it's been good to see this season as well, especially with it being our first title in however long. It was great to see it covered so well.
I think we've got a team who, well, I mentioned James Richardson earlier. Of course, he's part of the team, and James as well. The other James Horncastle is a regular fixture too. And I think we've got a group of commentators now who, over the years, I know we lost the rights for a period of time, but across that 10-year period, I think you've got a group of commentators now who are very well versed in Serie A, and hopefully that that shows. I think people. I suppose I can only truly speak for myself, but I think people within the company love the league as well. I think that you can tell that. I think that shows really in terms of the breadth of knowledge that people clearly. Obviously, when I'm not doing it, I'm sitting at home watching it as just a regular viewer, so I can enjoy it in that way as well. If I wasn't working on Golazzo Live, I would be at home on a Sunday night watching it. So it's great. It's a great show to be involved in. I thoroughly enjoy working on that.
You mentioned before sort of about having a growing affinity for the league again after you started working covering more Serie A football. You might not be able to reveal this for reasons of not wanting to appear biased and stuff like that, but I think Lorenzo knows the question that's coming. Is there a team that's, even if sort of growing up, that you had a soft spot for, or several teams that you liked the kits of, or something like that? It just feels like everybody from that kind of 90s football Italia era, like my dad had a soft spot for Milan growing up because they had the nicest kits and the best players. Was it like that for you, or have you managed to stay completely impartial?
No, that's one of the things that I really enjoy about more than many things I really enjoy about covering this league is that I'm not sort of held back, or I can enjoy all the games and I can enjoy all the teams.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll constantly get people who will accuse you of bias. That just goes with the territory of being a commentator. You know, it's ridiculous. I laugh at it. I find it ridiculous. But you know, that's just you just have to shrug it off. And if you argued with every person who says that you bias, I mean, I said to someone the other day, if you ever look at if you ever type a commentator's name in or a TV station's name in during a particularly, you know, tough 50-50 type game, you'll find 50% of people will say the commentator's biased against one team and the other 50% will say they're biased against the other. So yeah, I think
that's how you know you've done a good job.
Exactly. So you have to take it with a pinch of salt, but no, I genuinely don't support any particular. In fact, if I could take this upstairs, I could show you my wardrobe, and it's full of Serie A kits from all the different teams. In fact, only the other day I got. Do you remember the Inter kit of so Mateus and Bremer and Klinsmann? That I think it was 1990 around that time. I got that.
Yeah, 89, 90. Yeah.
Yeah, and I got at the same time I ordered the Milan George Weah Opal top as well. So
yeah.
So I just love the league. I genuinely just love the league, and it's nice in a way that I'm able to go on things like social media, and I feel like I can say anything about any team, whether it's positive or critical, and hopefully people know it's coming from a neutral place. So I'm not looking to, you know, deliberately criticize any particular team, and equally when I'm broadcasting, there is no agenda, there is no bias. It's just genuinely calling what I see in front of me. So I like to have that. I mean, clearly, you made a great point when you said about, I think you said about your dad looking at the badges and the kits.
Yeah.
That's what really has attracted me to the league as a whole as a young boy. It was so different to English football in terms of, you know, the sights you saw in the crowd, the crests of the teams, you know, the way that the fans organized themselves, the names of the stadiums just sounded glamorous, you know, San Siro, Olimpico, and Artemio Franchi. These names just sound, wow, this is brilliant, you know. So I've just always retained that, that love of the league as a whole. Obviously, there were players that stand out from that time. I mean, everyone of my age will tell you that Baggio was one of their favorite players.
Yeah.
He played for so many Italian teams that
all of them.
He did. He played. Yeah.
So,
ticked off every club in North Italy, I think, didn't he, by the end? But yeah, definitely an iconic player from an iconic era. Just speaking sort of more specifically about last season, I mean, obviously we're going to say it was absolutely fantastic and memorable because we were the ones who emerged as the victors of the Scudetto. You commentated on a fair few of our games. How did you think last season was in terms of it being potentially the most captivating title race in Europe, certainly among the top leagues? And do you think that in the end we were good value for winning the title based on what you saw?
I think that it was the most exciting Serie A season that I've had as a broadcaster. We had a really good title race, one that captured the imagination and took us right down to the wire. I can remember Don Hutchison and we did a lot of Serie A games together last season. And I can remember us saying, like 3 or 4 months before the end of the season, let's hope this goes down to the final day. You know, this could be brilliant. And, you constantly get, and then there was that sort of spectre of Juve for a while. Could they make a bit of a late comeback? And then you thought it would be Inter's, and then it swung back Milan's way, and Napoli, we were in there as well. So it was just brilliant. It was so exciting to broadcast, as I say, right down to the end. I think it was a marvelous achievement from Milan. And I'm actually not sure that it's been talked about just how big an achievement and against the odds achievement that it actually was. I think because it is Milan and because of the name that they have around the globe and the history that they have, people might just say, "Oh, Milan are back then." Yeah, but you've got to know what's gone before to know why that was such an incredible achievement and the circumstances in which they achieved it as well. I mean, over the last decade, I can remember thinking and sat here and writing articles and things like that, thinking, how will Milan get back to where they need to be? Who will be the coach who achieves that? Who will be the players? What are the signings that they would make that would eventually get them there? Who would the owners be? And if you'd have said to me, even 4 years ago, that they would get back to the top of Italian football under Stefano Pioli, who'd never won a major honour as a manager, with a Zlatan Ibrahimovic at the age of 40 and owned by a hedge fund. I mean, who would have believed that would even be remotely possible. I mean, that's incredible.
Remarkable.
And I think that is a sensational story in itself. And the fact that, I think Milan fans are going to have to remember this as well going forward into next season when the competition will be very intense again. I think Juve will be stronger this time, that they're ahead of schedule. I don't think that Milan should have won the league, really. If you look at where they were at the start of the season, I'm not sure many Milan fans would have put their hand up and said, yeah, we're ready to win the league. But they went out and they did it because, primarily, in my opinion, because of there's so many reasons. I mean, the impact of Ibrahimovic and his sort of link, the way he's combined behind the scenes with Pioli is an unbelievable feat. I think that's been quite remarkable, the impact that he's had. But defensively, again, this is not talked about enough, in my opinion. I was looking before I came on here. I just double checked that I'd got these numbers right. 11 clean sheets in the final 16 games, and they conceded 6 goals in those final 16 games with a centre-back partnership, one who's 22 and the other's 24. Yeah. That is superb. It really, really is, and that gives me belief for Milan that cornerstone. I think is so important to build upon going forward. Can they now go on and do it again? They've got a real quality centre-back partnership behind them, a goalkeeper with so much of his career ahead of him as well. There's many other players we could mention too, but yeah, it's Milan last season is a fantastic story, and it was a wonderful. I called it on air a title race for the ages, and I will stand by that.
I remember you saying that, actually. I don't know what game it was that you said it, but I think I remember you saying it.
It certainly was. It was, I suppose, very, very exciting for the neutral. My nerves went so many times during that running, though. I was actually playing football for the second half of the Inter Bologna game when Bologna obviously came from behind and won, and that meant that their game in hand had gone, and we were in control of our own destiny. And I think that is probably the very first moment where I thought, well, we could at least take it right down to the wire. I just always presumed we'd have a bit of a drop off. That's me. As Lorenzo knows, I tend to be quite pessimistic as a fan based on what we've seen over the past decade. But and then things aligned, and honestly, I think the way that we won that last game away at Sassuolo was everything about us, everything that Pioli would have wanted to see. I mean, we were all over him.
It was incredible.
Yeah, it really was. And as you mentioned there about the centre back pairing, they're almost perfectly encapsulating our transfer strategy as well. I mean, one of them was a player who'd never made a senior appearance for Lyon, and we signed him for 500k. And then the other one was somebody who'd kind of been tossed to the wayside by Chelsea, and we decided to take a punt on him, and he's been one of the best defenders in the league since. So no, it was incredibly memorable. I think it would be fair to say. And you sort of touched on it there about sort of heading into next season and whether we might be able to replicate it. First of all, where do you think that Milan could potentially improve? Obviously, the transfer window's open for another few weeks. And where do you see our rivals? I guess mainly Inter, Juve, Napoli are kind of, they're losing key pieces and stuff. But yeah, anybody else who might be in and around the title race?
Yeah, I think that where I remember thinking towards the end of the season just how impressive a feat it was defensively, that how reliant they were on that because of the fact that there was undoubtedly a lack of creativity in that final third, primarily because Ibrahim Diaz, the most regularly picked of the players who played in that position behind the front man, there was just no output from him. I mean, there might be a lot of reasons for that. COVID, I think, was given as one of them. But I don't think in final something like 20 odd games he got a goal or an assist. I don't know if I'm wrong with that. I don't remember one anyway.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, and I think that
his last goal was September 25th, so that is an awful long time ago. Yeah.
So I think if you think about even if a player had contributed 6 or 7 assists and 4 or 5 goals in that position, that just shows you what an extra impact that could have made for Milan. So I think that is an area of the team that for me needs strengthening. And I think, look, the next step for Milan, now that they're back on top in Italian football, is clearly, obviously, firstly, trying to defend that title. But it's got to be ambitious in the Champions League. It's got to be perhaps first and foremost to get out of the group stage. So I think they've got to be looking at players that improve that first 11. And I think another glaring area for me is on the right-hand side there. I don't think somebody like Macias is good enough personally to take them to that next level. But who they get in that position is going to be difficult, because I don't think it's any secret that Milan don't have a massive budget to play with. I mean, certainly can't compete with Premier League clubs, for instance. So they've got to be creative, as you alluded to a minute or so ago, in terms of the signings that they make. And I'm very interested to see what they do in that position. I know that in terms of that position behind the front man, and I suppose you could say he could play on the right as well, it would be Ziyech. But I have to say, I've got my doubts on Ziyech. I'm not so sure that he would fit into again, go back to what you said, where the profile of Milan signings has been maybe to sign younger players with high ceilings of potential growth. Yeah. He doesn't fit into that, does he? I mean, he's somebody who's 30 in March. In terms of his numbers, which is what Milan need more output from in that position. 4 goals and 3 assists in the Premier League last season, 6 goals and 6 assists in 46 Premier League appearances. Now, is that a man to hang your hat on? I'm not so sure. Look, fans of his who would look back at his career as a whole would rightly point out that if you look at his performance in the Eredivisie, I mean, the numbers there were certainly stacked up. I looked back over them before I spoke to you. 79 goals and 97 assists in the Eredivisie. But we all know there's a big drop-off in terms of level from the Premier League to the Eredivisie. So it's a difficult one because he would be on massive wages as well. And I just wonder whether that might be. But again, it's we don't know, I suppose, all the options. But there's some big calls to make, because having got in this position of strength now, they need to capitalize on it. And I think that, as I've already mentioned, Juve are going to become stronger again. They can't not do with Pogba and Di Maria coming into the club. That has to improve them. Chiesa will be back soon. Vlahovic is going to have had a full pre-season, his first full season with Juve. I know there's areas of that team that would worry me if I were a Juventus fan, that they need to strengthen, but they have to be stronger than they were last season. Napoli would be the one for me who looked the most vulnerable in terms of dropping out the top 4.
I agree. I would agree with that, yeah.
And I think that Inter will feel that they can go on and win the title again. I think they will be right in the mix with, the fact that Lukaku has returned to the club. I mean, how hungry is he going to be? I'm interested to see whether Bremer arrives at Inter, because I think he is a fantastic centre half. I mean,
really good.
He's annoyingly good if Inter get him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he is a top player, and I'm surprised that I would have thought. I mean, they may well be doing in the background, but I thought Juve would make a real push for him.
There's now whispers that they are, with De Ligt going to Bayern Munich. That would certainly give them the money to do that.
So how complicated that transfer would be, bearing in mind who he plays for at the moment, that's another perhaps factor to consider. But where he ends up is going to be, I think we'll have a small bearing perhaps on who's strongest, actually, because I think he's that good. I really, really do. I mean, what's going to happen with Skriniar? I'm surprised that they would let him go, actually. I really am, because I think he's been one of the most consistent centre halves in the league for a good number of years now. But it's going to be brilliant, is it? I mean, will Roma be stronger again? That's another one to consider.
I mean, obviously, you either love or hate Jose, it seems, but I think him coming to Serie A, to Serie A, was actually good, because he's great entertainment value.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And I think that he's quite methodical as well in the way that he likes to build things, and I think that he's seen potential in Roma, and I think that they'll do much better this season than scrapping for 6th, 7th place. That won't wash for Jose. He'll want more than that. I hope it is. Hope it's fascinating, and I just hope it's not as nerve-wracking as last season was, because I feel like I skipped about 5
I do.
birthdays.
I loved it. It was brilliant.
Yeah. I bet. And also I do think that Italian football in general as a product, fans of other teams might not agree with this, but I do think that the league benefits from having a very strong Milan, Inter and Juve at the same time. As the 3 traditional biggest and wealthiest clubs, it just seems to be a better product when those 3 sides are doing well. Be a very interesting summer for all the teams involved. I just back generally to commentary, a couple of things that I've wondered. First of all, what would you say is the best Serie A game that you've commentated on? And then general game, and you can have a bit of time to think about it if you need it.
There's just
but
so
yeah,
many.
a Serie A one and a general one. I mean, yes, sometimes you might get the Spezia 0-0 against Bologna on a Tuesday night or something, and that might very quickly vanish from the memory. But I'd imagine some of them really stick in there.
Yeah, it's just been so many. It's hard. Sometimes I just pick out moments with Serie A. I guess I remember thinking at the end of last season when I looked. I'm very fortunate in that I commentate on so many different leagues. You know, everything from the Premier League and the Champions League, the Europa League to Serie A, National League, the non-league top tier of non-league football, the WSL. Right across the piece, I remember thinking last season, after all those different leagues and games, one of my moments from last season, one of my probably top, 3 or 4 moments was Tonali's goal at the Olimpico against Lazio. It just encapsulated so much about last season and the drama of it. The noise that came from what was an incredible traveling contingent of Milan supporters. Obviously, what it meant to the title race. The player who scored it, who I think is somebody who's got a really high ceiling of growth and is still so young and can get so much better, and was so inspirational, I felt, for Milan at the end of last season. So that would be one of my moments. And, funnily enough, I was thinking only the other day about when Koulibaly signed for Chelsea. I think back to his time at Napoli and that goal that he scores against Juve that beat Juve, if you remember, when it looked like they were finally going to win the league title. I remember that night just thinking, it gives me goosebumps thinking about that goal because it was just such an incredible moment. Naples was like almost on fire, wasn't it, in the hours after it, where people thought that this is it. They almost celebrated the league too early, didn't they?
Yeah.
And that's a really memorable moment. There are just so many. I always remember in the fairly early days of BT, I think it was, having the rights. You remember the Totti goal in the derby when he did the selfie? That's
selfie, yeah. That was fantastic.
That's a moment I'll always remember. But there's been plenty of Milan into derby. One of the things I absolutely adore about Italian football is the way that the long memories that supporters have. Like, for example, Fiorentina fans will go back, decades to talk about how, certain situations with Juventus and the reasons that they don't like Juventus and players who've been transferred. And, I don't know if I'm going too far to call it hatred, but those dislikes or those things that fester, they just fester forevermore in Italian football. A derby means more, I think, in Italian football than it does perhaps in English football. It just feels different. And that for me is such an attraction of Italian football. So those games, there's so many times that when I know that I'm doing, say, a Derby d'Italia, or I don't know, even the Turin derby, any of the derbies really, even the Genoa derby. There's just so many. Or the Rome derby, I suppose, in particular. I mean, that's probably the one with the most edge to it, maybe. When I know that I'm doing one of those games on a Sunday, I'm excited for the whole week because you just say, what's going to happen? And that's the other thing, is that in Italy, the build up to a game like that, it's not just like a couple of days before, it's like all week, or for a couple of weeks before, and it's all everybody's talking about it. The papers are full of it. And yeah, I just love that side of things about Italian football. It just feels to me, I love English football, but it's just one of the differences, I would say, and one of the reasons I love it so much.
I wanted to jump in on this quickly, Ollie, if I can. A question that's very similar to that is, I was wondering, obviously your whole job is commentating. You're speaking about football for 90 plus minutes in an intense way. Do you have a moment, a player or a passage of player that has literally left you speechless? And can you remember what that particularly was?
I can't think of one that's left me speechless, because I probably wouldn't have gone much.
Very good, would it?
I wouldn't get much work.
Closest to speechless you can get, I suppose.
Closest to speechless.
Yeah.
God, that's tough. I can't think of one that's made me speechless, but there have been so many like wow moments. Absolutely. And I would put that Tonali one in. Sometimes it's with commentary. Sometimes less is more as well in moments like that. It's letting it breathe. It's not necessarily, you don't have to fill every second. So, sometimes when you have a particularly huge moment in a game or a goal that means a huge amount, maybe it wins a league title or wins a really exciting game, or it's huge for a particular player. Sometimes it's good to just let the moment breathe, because I think you remember a moment when Tonali scored in the Lazio game, to give you an example. And there was a moment where I'd called the initial goal, and then do you remember when the camera then pans to, I think it's the Cherby laughing, because he was just, I think he got criticised, but I think he was just laughing at the ridiculousness of it. It was like, I can't believe that's just happened to us. And there was a player on the line on the floor. And I think sometimes you don't need to say anything. A picture says everything.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes as a commentator, it's good almost to be lost for words for a second or two.
Yeah.
And then you need to find the appropriate words. And that might just be a couple of words. It doesn't have to be a great long sentence. I think I said massive, absolutely massive after you'd seen them on the floor, the Lazio players on the floor. And that just summed it up for me. It was massive. It didn't really need much more saying than that. So yeah, I think that is a key skill of commentary. And you saying being lost for words has sort of brought that to my mind. That I think as commentators, I'm sometimes as wary of when not to speak as I am to speak, if that makes sense. So that's an important side of it. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, moments where you've been nearly I mean, I don't know whether it'll mean much to you guys, but as I say earlier, I covered the National League, and we had an absolutely incredible moments in this season's playoffs where Wrexham
was the Grimsby. The Grimsby run was absolutely amazing,
astonishing.
I really enjoyed watching that.
Yeah, and I think they were probably some of the closest moments that you might come to speechless from last season. I think the season before that in the playoffs as well, funnily enough, in the National League, the goalkeeper for Torquay scored an equaliser with pretty much the final minutes of the game to send it into extra time. And that was another moment where you always know that it's kind of hit peak sort of wow, when I'm sort of turning to my co-commentator going like this, and you've still got to kind of get that composure and find the words. But that's what's so great about the job. I mean, you get paid to have the most amazing adrenaline rushes. It's not many jobs can give you that. That's another thing that I love about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's different sat watching the game as an armchair fan, I suppose, and it's obviously very different as well when it's a game that's not involving your team. But just on what Lorenzo said, the one game that stands out for me last season was when Roma threw away that lead against Juve at home, and Juve came back to win 4-3. And I remember when the fourth goal went in, I sat there and I just couldn't summon any emotions. It was as if they were playing FIFA on a really high difficulty, and then with 20 minutes left, they changed it right down to easy. Yeah. And then they just scored those 3 goals, and I sat there like, how are we meant to? How do you beat this lot? But yeah, that was the one that stood out for me, and that wasn't even involving us. But yeah, I was just going to ask before you mentioned about not speaking too much. Do you have any other top tips for people who might be listening to this, wanting to get into commentary, or just generally things that you've picked up maybe from other people in the industry in terms of rules or advice for how to do it? Because as I said, when I tried it, it just wasn't happening. Really, really, really difficult to find the right words and to convey sort of what's going on in the right tone, but obviously it seems very natural when you do it.
I think it's one of those jobs where you can't really teach somebody how to be a football commentator. There isn't a degree or a qualification you could get in being a football commentator. It's a role within broadcasting that it takes on the skills that are learnt in other areas of broadcasting. So I've been a newsreader, I've been a sports reader, I've been a radio journalist, I've been a TV presenter, a radio presenter, and I use all of those different skills in commentary. I think it's important to be a football commentator, to be a rounded broadcaster. There's very few people who will go and simply do commentary and that's it. Because having that rounded rounded broadcastability, I just think helps you. A lot about football commentary often is getting yourself out of tricky situations, believe it or not. And you sort of learn that through that experience. So that is something I'd always advise somebody who wants to be a football commentator. Don't obsess about just doing commentary. Get yourself out there and, don't be afraid to read the news on the radio. Don't be afraid to go and interview people. They're really useful, valuable skills that, and don't be afraid to do the hard yards as well. Don't just think that you're straight away going to go into your dream job. Football commentary takes a long time to get to a level where, if you think about it, how many over the years, and I'm going back over many, many decades here to even when I was a boy and perhaps before that, how many of what you might call the top commentators were, in their 30s, that they're nearly always, if you think back, to people like Motson and Davis, people like that, they're always sort of 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, even Martin's in his, I think he's in his 70s now.
70s, yeah.
Ian Darke's in his 60s. I could reel off so many different names. So I think that authority perhaps is important in commentary, and maybe that to a degree comes with age, but I think it also, you get that respect through experience as well. If the listener knows that you know what you're talking about, that immediately gains you experience. I would always say to somebody who wants to cover, for example, Serie A or Ligue 1, or a league that maybe has not a niche audience, but an audience a smaller audience than you might get for something like the Premier League, who know they know that league inside out, and you can't pull the wool over their eyes. That if you've not done the work, they're going to know. So you've got to know your stuff. So I think that's absolutely vital. I've always said this to any young broadcaster who says to me, I want to be a commentator. I say, you've got to do the research. You can't take shortcuts. You have to think outside the box. You have to make sure that you know your subject. And why that's so important is because if you know that you've done the work, and if you know that you've your subject, that breeds confidence within you, which then leads to breeding authority on air, which then leads to respect from the viewer. So it's it's like a knock-on effect, you see, and it's why it's so important. So I could bore you to death about all, how important it is to do various things to being a commentator. But I think they would be the headlines, if you like. Take your time, learn your craft, be respectful of your craft, do your research, think outside the box, try and be a bit different. Always try and tell people things that they don't already know. I think that's very important about commentary. Sometimes less is more in TV commentary. You don't have to fill every single second. Let it breathe. Use your co-commentator if you have one. Use their knowledge. Ask them questions. Tease information out of them. All things like that. I mean, as I say, I could probably write. I could be here all day, really, talking about it, because it's just what I do every day of my life. But
fascinating, though, Adam. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you think so. I'm glad you're not nodding off.
In terms of research, do you? I say still do all your own researches, and if you know you're covering a big game, will you sort of sit down the night before and make some notes to have to hand, or is it more a case of you might get handed sort of a list of stats and things to mention during the game? Sort of how does that process work before a game?
It can depend on what I'm doing. That can form a part of it. Certain games I will get given stat packs that have been put together for me by a statistician. The way that I've always worked, and everybody's different, and that's absolutely fine. No commentator I've ever met presents their research or does their research in the same way. And honestly, I mean this, everybody does it differently. I've never seen two commentators who present their information in the same way, which I always find like a real quirk of commentators. We're a strange bunch. But it's I think I always take the view of, I'll go out and do the research, and then I'll make sure I've done my prep to my standard that I think I need to do it to. And then I'll use those stat packs to maybe just give me an extra little gem here and there. So I might look through the stat pack once I've done my prep, and I might go, oh, that guy's found out something I didn't know, or, oh, I like that line, I'll have that. So I just sort of cherry pick.
Yeah.
But I've done the majority of the prep myself. And the other thing with stat packs as well is, one of the things I use the most in commentary is what I call color. So it might be a little fact you might find out about a player, or like one that a lot of people seem to like when I did the Europa Conference League final was Ibanez. It's gone. He was his improvement on FIFA was the highest of any player in the game. And then a lot of people seem to find that was like, I mean, it's not, it was just a bit of fun, but just little things like that people might not know. Like Tammy Abraham, I remember before that game, they were laughing in the Italian media because he'd been spotted out drinking cappuccino in the evening, and they were like, "No, we do this in the morning." So little things like that. Yeah, little things like that, and you're obviously not going to get that in a stat pack. So they're the things that you have to go out and you have to find them yourselves. But yeah, the information that you'll get given might be different for different games. But I always say it's got to be a labor of love, really, your prep. And if it isn't, then you're going to struggle, because if you don't like doing the prep, I think you're in the wrong job, really. I think you need to get a. It's funny how many commentators you'll just randomly tweet out this random fact that they found, because they're so excited to have found out this little bit of information. They can't wait till they're going on air. They've got to get it out. And I think you've got to be that geek. You've got to want to think, I can't believe what I've just found out, sat in my kitchen with my laptop on my own. I think you've got to have that inside you, really. But prep can take a long time. I mean, it's what I spend the majority of my time doing, is sat on my own, on my laptop. If you're doing your prep for a game, it depends what it is. It depends what stage of the season it is, because at the start of the season, you can be starting a bit more from not a blank piece of paper, but with squad changes over the summer, maybe managerial changes, there's more information perhaps to update. Whereas once you get to perhaps, I don't know, January, February, you're topping it up maybe, rather than starting from scratch, if that makes sense. So it changes a little bit and evolves as the season goes on. But yeah, you prep, if you're doing it properly, I would say I don't know, if I was doing a Serie A game, it should take me on and off about 2 days, really. But you're juggling games. I might be doing, typically 3 games a week. It can be as much as 4 or 5 games a week. It's rarely, it can drop to 2, but I'd say the average during the season is probably about 3 games a week. So you're juggling your prep, and I might do a bit of Salernitana against Roma, and then I might switch to Dorking Wanderers against Chesterfield, and then I might do
what a life that is, eh?
Yeah. So it's you have to be versatile, and you have to. It has to be a labour of love, I think, your research. Otherwise, you're probably in the wrong profession, really.
We put out a questions tweet to get people to fire them in, and there was one that stood out for me. That I'll just ask as a last question. It came from Andrew Marcarter, and he said, basically, why do you think that Serie A is still erroneously labelled as a defensive league? And it's an interesting one, because I know that Twitter is sometimes not a hotbed for common sense and for niche and for analysis and all that kind of stuff. But I do agree with sort of the precursor of the question, in that it is still looked upon, in my opinion, by fans of other leagues, particularly the Premier League, where you get perhaps more bandwagoners and things like that, as being a defensive league where there's not that much good football played. Whereas I think last season, out of the top 5 leagues, Serie A had the second highest goals per game average, I want to say. But yeah, do you think that the attitude is perhaps changing, and what do you think's contributed to that?
Well, I think if somebody says to me that Serie A is defensive, I know they don't watch the league. I mean, it's as simple as that, really, because it's one of the most attacking, open leagues around these days. It really is, and it's just a historical thing. I mean, it goes back to Catenaccio, doesn't it? I mean, that's and look, let's be honest. Whilst the quality of the footballers in the 90s, when Italian football was first beamed onto televisions in the UK, it was a much more low-scoring league. Defence was more often king. I remember, I think it was the first Football Italia game. I think it was 3-3, actually, ironically enough. I think that was it Sampdoria Lazio? I think it was at Maratti. It was an unbelievable game. But as a rule, I think it's fair to say that, we always remember that great Milan side who conceded so few goals on the way to winning the European Cup. I think I always say to people when they talk about Italian football and the defensive side of the game, I always say that there's a difference, in my opinion, between defending well and being defensive. I think you can still defend well and not necessarily be defensive per se.
Mm.
And maybe Italian football, simply because of its DNA, Italian footballers have retained that ability when needed to defend well. As a rule, I would say that Serie A as a league is now more open and expansive than I can remember it ever being. But I still think there is an ability within Italian teams, maybe perhaps in Europe. I mean, Roma was a great example in the Europa Conference League final.
Defended very well. Yeah.
Defended exceptionally well. Chris Smalling was outstanding that night. One of the best defensive performances I saw all season. And yeah, I get it. Some people might say, well, it was, they were playing against an Eredivisie team, but it was an Eredivisie team that had reached a European final. So they deserve respect and kudos for that. And they had a lot of attacking threats too. So I think there is still that ability within Italian teams to defend well when required. But I think across the league as a whole now, there's an acceptance that, look, we're going to go for this. I think there's more teams going, right, let's go hammer and tongs here, when maybe in the past there was more of a reluctance to do so. But I think another thing about Italian football that is a difference to perhaps English football in particular, and it's something that any British player who goes out there always, without fail, will say if they're asked, is what is the differences? And they will say, well, Italian football is so much more tactical. You walk through things more often in coaching. The briefings are much more methodical. They're much more thorough. Coaches will go into much more detail about what they want from us. Tamori was saying how much that has brought his game on.
Yeah.
Made him probably more rounded, I think he said. They weren't his exact words, but that was the meaning I took from what he said, that it's made him more rounded as a footballer, maybe more versatile as a footballer as well, in terms of what teams and leagues he could go into after perhaps Milan and Italy. And I think that tactical side of the game maybe is another reason, perhaps, I'm sort of thinking out loud, really, as to perhaps why people think that maybe there is still that defensive side to it. But yeah, I mean, to sum up, I would go back to what I said previously, that I think it's an historical thing, really.
Yeah.
That it's just always, I mean, you very often hear people who don't watch the league say, if an Italian team wins 1-0 in Europe, it'd be, typical Italian team, keep a clean sheet. And you think, well, I know what you mean, but it's not really like that anymore. And you probably kind of told me you don't really watch the league. But I think that's where it comes from, really. It's historical, but the league is, fellas, you watch it, you know where I'm coming from. It's so exciting.
Yeah. They still do. Koulibaly, for example, I think he's going to be amazing for Chelsea. And,
absolutely. And if you look at, I was looking at this the other day because I know that Koulibaly now has left the league, but I would say that Serie A is the highest concentration of top centre-backs in the major leagues, including the Premier League.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a hard top five debate. Like you keep seeing on Twitter, sort of top five Serie A centre-backs, and it is really tough to narrow it down to five. And when you think about that, it really does show, as you say, that there's a lot of very, very good centre halves, and maybe that feeds into it a little bit as well. I don't know, but I think Koulibaly will do quite well at Chelsea.
Oh, absolutely.
Adam, thank you so much for coming on.
Pleasure.
Been fantastic to pick your brains and speak for us all, I suppose, when I said that we look forward to hearing you again next season. Hopefully,
thank you.
Shouting for a few more Sandro Tonali goals. That'd be nice.
That'd be lovely.
Thank you very much, and we hope to have you on again in the future. That would be great.
Thank you for asking me, and good luck with the podcast.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Brilliant. Right. That's great. Thank you very much for that. We really appreciate it. It overran a little bit, but I had a list of questions and then stuff pops up as you're talking, and appreciate the time. I think you should just be able to close the tab, and it should be fine. And then we're going to crack on and carry on with some
worries.
News and stuff.
Thank you again, Adam.
Yeah,
it's a pleasure. Thank you for your kind words about the shows and BT and stuff. It's much appreciated. And good luck for next season.
Thank you. Cheers, Adam. Bye-bye.
See you, fellas. Take care. Bye.
Have a good one. Cheers. Thank you again to Adam for that. Some brilliant insight from him. And as I say, look forward to more excellent BT coverage of Serie A in the new season. Speaking of coverage, we've got a couple of preseason friendlies to talk about finally. I mean, the first one was 3 periods of 20 minutes. It wasn't even a full game. But it was just good to see the lads out there kicking a ball around again. That part was good. We scored. So this was against Lamine Almeno, who are an amateur side. I don't know. I think they're a local-ish team, but they're fourth tier. So they are still an amateur side. They actually played quite well in the middle period. But yeah, we were 3-0 up after 20 minutes. The first goal of the pre-season was scored by Messias, cut inside on his left bottom corner. Then Ante Rebic scored from distance, a goal a bit like the Salernitana one. And Gabi, a close-range finish, made it 3-0. We can't take too much from that because players have been coming back in waves from having extended vacation due to international duty and stuff like that. But as I say, it was just good to see some football with a score.
Some running
that
in there
actually matters.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we'll mention the Cologne game as well now, and just sort of tie them both in together. We're recording this on Sunday, so it was yesterday that we beat Cologne 2-1 at the Rhine Energy Stadion. Giroud got a brace. It was his first bit of pre-season action, so good to see him hit the ground running after a pretty damn good second half of last season.
He's looking incredibly sharp, isn't he?
Yeah,
Giroud.
He did.
For 34, it's just unbelievable.
That first goal, there aren't too many strikers in world football who would have the audacity to think I'm going to chip the keeper and knock it in
and put it off
to them.
so well, so well. That was what a play.
Yeah, and the second goal, I actually thought Cantona chipped it into the top corner, but it had deflected.
Tiny deflection though, great shot nonetheless.
Yeah, but. And generally, there were some positive performances through both games. I suppose the second game has more meaning as a 90-minute game against a top-flight opponent. You know, Cologne are no mugs. They've been a consolidated Bundesliga side now since they got promoted a few years back. And they're further along in their pre-season preparation than what we are. So it was actually a very good test, and really, really liked what I've seen from Yassine Adli.
I was about to say the same thing.
He's the one who stands out for me.
He again, I was talking about Giroud being sharp. I mean, Adli came pre-season, and even in the first, friendly game. I mean, he's really sharp. He's looking straight on it. He's running like no man's business. Like really, really good engine on him. Yeah, big fan. Intelligent passes, good tracking back, brilliant player. Very happy with him at the moment.
Yeah, I think I mentioned before, in previous episodes, because of the fact that he's only 21 for a start, and because of the fact he was joining up with the squad after a very difficult season at Bordeaux, with all of their problems and finishing bottom, and then they've now been relegated again to the third tier because of finances and what have you. So he came from a difficult environment. So perhaps that might have just put the brakes on the expectations for him to come in and make an immediate impact. But sometimes the change to a new environment, the start of a new adventure, shall we say, and joining a team with such a good spirit and energy at the moment like we have, it could just be exactly what he's needed to unlock everything that's in there. And the vision, the technique that we've seen so far, confidence for him to take on those dribbles. I'm really, really excited. It is only pre-season. It has only been, about 90 minutes combined that he's played. But the signs are good. And,
I was just going to say, it's not just what he says or what he did on the pitch, it's what he's been saying. I mean, his interviews, the openness, what he's been saying about Milan, the homework, if you will, that he's been doing previously to coming. I think that's just such positive signs for a player that really wants to be here. That's what we need. No, it
is good, and yes, those words were. That's one of the running themes that there's been is new signings have talked about how basically they were pitched a project that they just couldn't turn down. So that still gives me hope that while there's a lot of frustration, some anger about the lack of activity in the transfer market, the signings we have gone for have been, first of all, a bit out of the blue. Adli was linked before, then everything went quiet, then bang, deal done. And there's been other operations like that, and they've often ended up being the best bits of business. So maybe no news is good news with where we're at the moment. Other things worth mentioning, I think, from the games, Rebic has looked very, very sharp as well. He didn't have the easiest season last season because of injuries and obviously partially as well because of Leao's explosion. He didn't exactly give him much room there. But he's looked fantastic in the first 2 pre-season outings. Wore the armband for both of them, which I think, again, pre-season, but perhaps it's symbolic of the way that he's sort of viewed as one of the leaders of this team still.
Absolutely.
And the performances and the work rate very much matched that what you want to see from him. And I think he's quite an adjective. I think that's a word. You know, he's a character who's sort of constantly on edge, maybe. And if you put a challenge in front of him, he's going to wrestle with it, you know. And I think that he will fancy this as a redemption season.
I agree, and that's what I completely agree with that. And I think it's nicer knowing. I mean, what was it, about 2 months ago, at the start of the transfer market? You know, when it opened. Not a month, sorry, 2-3 weeks ago, we were saying he might be going. You know, there was speculation that he might be off. And I didn't want that to happen because whether or not he starts every game, it's probably unlikely. He's a brilliant player to have around. He's such a wild card. And like you said, his attitude, he's got such a unique, almost aggressive attitude about him that I think is perfect at certain points in the season, in certain games, in certain environments where he'll be invaluable. And I hope that's the case this coming season, to be honest.
Yeah, comes down to the old thing of for me, you need a bastard in your team.
Yeah,
you know, you need someone who is going to be like that. And I think when Ibra's not on the pitch, we know he's not going to be on the pitch until probably February, the earliest. Rebic can be that guy. He can be the guy who starts a bit of something just to get the and he chases every single ball. I mean, we saw. It's funny that Adam was mentioning the Tonali goal. It was Rebic's run and winning the ball back that led to that. And he also won the ball back, leading to the first goal in the game against Cologne. That's who we played, Cologne. So that was a good sign. And then I think Kalulu is an obvious one. I mean, I say obvious, just the way he ended last season. I would have been surprised if he came out and looked awful, but he looked really, really good. Kalulu Gabbia as a pairing in the first half of that Cologne game was actually. Obviously, it's not going to be that. We're probably never going to see that. However, they both looked good in their own way. And
they did, yeah. Gabbia,
and then,
I don't know. I wasn't as convinced about Gabbia. He played very safe, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But he lacked some composure. Again, I mean, these games are not massive tests, let's be honest. But the Cologne game, there were certain things. He didn't do anything wrong, but... I don't know. There were certain things he did that I was thinking in certain situations, giving corners unnecessarily, that could lead to conceding goals, which I wasn't a fan of. But he did do well. I mean, I'm picking at something that doesn't really need to be picked at. But
I think when Mikolas was on as well, and that was one of the things. It was good to see a couple of the younger lads get run outs in both games. But yeah, I thought Gabbia did well when he was next to Mikolas because he then becomes the older guy who has to help. And I didn't notice some communication going on with like positioning and this is how we play, this is how we do things. So that was good. And speaking of younger players, in that first friendly, Shaka Traore looked phenomenal. He was just missing...
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was missing a bit of end product, don't get me wrong. But he played on the left. And he just looked really, really good. Like a perhaps not as well-rounded Leao in terms of bursting behind the shoulder of the centre-back and getting deep to the byline. And there's something there. You know, he made his Serie A debut at 16. He's now 18.
Okay, so he's incredibly raw then, yeah.
Right, but he did well for the Primavera last season. He got 8 goals, 5 assists. So he's one to keep an eye on. You know, maybe give it a year or two. Maybe give him a loan if the right team comes along. And I think he's one to definitely watch out for. And then the next game that we've got is on Saturday. We're playing in Hungary, so that'll be an interesting one. It's perhaps not as high profile as Marseille will be and Cologne has been, but it'll be good to get some minutes in the legs of the lads who have just come back. Tamari, Teo, Tonali, So that will be good as well. The preparations will be ramped up, and then it's transfer business wise. About 5 minutes before we started recording, Mattia Caldara has gone on loan.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah,
with an option to buy. So that's a third loan for him now after Atalanta and Venezia.
Did we renew the contract with him to make sure that he can be loaned out?
I think he's contracted till 2024.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember.
That's what I heard. Something. I swear I heard something about a contract situation with him. Just to ensure. I don't know. I could have misread that, but
yeah, I mean, look, he's played he cost us 35 million technically as part of the Bonucci deal, and he's played 65 minutes. And it's unfortunate that that's the way it's going to remain, really, because there was a time when he was one of Italy's big hopes. I think it would be fair to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I do hope things have worked out for him, or things do work out for him, because the injury luck he's had has been so rotten. 2 serious knee injuries, pretty much back to back. That'd be enough to. He actually did I think he did an article about saying how close he was to quitting.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
When you get that, it must be hard to summon the strength to carry on, really. So yeah, I hope he does well, because he's still in his I think he's mid-20s still, so there's
6 or something like that.
Yeah. There's some time ahead for him.
Yeah.
And there's quite a few loans knocking about. Still, the rumor of Daniel Maldini going on loan to Hellas Verona with the option to buy it and buy back.
What do you think about Maldini? Where did he play in Cologne? He played more central, didn't it? Or number 10 again? Was it?
As a 10. Yeah. I think he does need a loan. I think we were probably put off the idea just because we wanted to, because he is still young, still very much got time on his side. We're 2 or 3 years maybe away from seeing what he will look like as the full finished article. I think they wanted to keep him around, obviously because of the family history, but perhaps more so because of who he is, and because of that, there's not going to be the same pressure to give immediate results. So they can keep him in and around the senior squad, give him minutes here and there, but really just hope that he develops in training and by being around other class players. But I think the time's come. The time's come. He needs game time, and Verona would be a good club for that, because they back youth. The way that they've developed Ilic, who they signed from Man City, makes me think they could hopefully do something similar with Daniel
Maldini as well. I do see glimpses of a player there, but I agree. He just needs to play football. He just needs to play football. It's as simple as that, really.
On the incoming front, there's not really too much. We thought that we were days away from signing Kate Lara last time, and we're still there. I mean, he sat out completely Club Brugge's Super Cup final today, and Fabrizio tweeted, among other sources, that he was left out so as not to risk injury because we're closing in. So I think this is going to get done. I think we might have to bump up that offer a little bit more, and it might touch around 35 mil, including bonuses. But we seem to have picked him. He's the guy. So it would be good as a statement to get this one over the line, and I'd be excited to see him.
Everyone seems enamoured by him in the management, don't they? In terms of they really are. Everyone's convinced. So that makes me excited, because I trust these guys. They've proven that they've gained our trust. Let's be honest. We lifted the Scudetto last season. Every major signing Maldini's made has been a success. So yeah, I'm excited for him to join. Just let's get it done. Let's just get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's now several reliable sources as well saying that Japhet Tanganga looks like being the guy we're going for the, I guess it'd be numerically replacing Romagnoli.
Right back.
He's played both at Spurs, to be honest. But we know that we like a versatile profile. So I suppose he fits the bill in that sense. As AJ mentioned last week, Spurs fans are mixed on him. Some think that
some love him,
makes too many errors, and some think why would we get rid of sort of one of our own, and he could thrive elsewhere like Tomori did. Chelsea will regret that a fair bit. But yeah, I don't know. I thought we might.
I don't like the idea of a dry loan for a player like that. There needs to
be a loan with option, I think. There's no point developing him for a year for them and sending him back. So yeah, that's where we're at, really. I guess it's mid-July now. There's things moving. Inter and Juve have moved quicker than us, it'd be fair to say, to make their statement signings. But what matters most is how the jigsaw looks, come the final day of the window. And it might be a market of opportunities again, as they've often used that buzzword, opportunities, just trying to seize what might come up later on, So yeah, we'll do a couple of questions, and then we'll call it. So, Michael Gambino asks, "What are your thoughts on the Wijnaldum rumours?" So it was Sky who reported that we got offered the chance to sign him on loan. I think it was an initial loan deal, but since then it seems that we not that interested, and he might go to Roma if anything. I
mean, he's a great player. Let's not beat around the bush. He would be good. He's not necessarily. I don't know if he's necessarily a Kessie replacement. He'd be similar mould to Renato, I think, in the more box-to-box, slightly more attacking, progressive midfielder. But as Adam said earlier on in the pod, it goes against what Milan do. He's 32, 33, right? So get him in on a loan might be good, but he'll be high wages. I don't know. I don't see this happening. I wouldn't be against the move, but I don't see us signing Wijnaldum at all.
Does seem to go against our strategy a little bit as well, given, as you say, wages, and he's 31 now.
Oh, he's 31. He was older than that. Apologies. But yeah, he's over that 30,
Yeah, I thought it was strange at the time that he left Liverpool, where he was clearly very valued by Klopp, and he had a clear role in that midfield three. And he just hasn't been guaranteed anywhere near the same level of importance at PSG. Do you know what? If it were a loan and there was some kind of, and they covered half the salary, which is what was apparently mentioned, and that would be something that I'd explore. That would be something that I'd think about. But I do think that we're after other profiles, probably for the
He's got to be on over 10 million, hasn't he, Wijnaldum, a year?
Yeah, I think he is on. Yeah.
That's a huge wage for us. So if he's a great player, let's not be honest. But yeah, unless it comes in those incredibly favourable terms, I don't think it's going to happen for us.
Mm-hmm. Well, Roma could be quite interesting though next season. Now, if they get Dybala and Wijnaldum, I don't know that they're certainly giving it a go, aren't they? Whatever
they are. I would be shocked. You know what? I'm very shocked about him going to Roma. It makes sense from Roma's play, how they play. But I mean, I don't know why we'd go to Roma, to be quite honest. But hey,
his stock is, ever since becoming a free agent, the poor lad's training on his own, and he doesn't know where he's playing next season.
No one wants him. Bless him.
I know. And I wonder. I mean, I think we've pretty much resigned ourselves in the race now, because if we're in the market for a 10, it's going to be CDK, and then if we get him, you're looking at Adli and Brahim. You've got two obvious backups there straight away. And Dybala perhaps doesn't fit the mould in terms of us having to boost that internal wage cap that we've got, and his injury history, and perhaps lack of resale value. At 28 now, I don't think he's necessarily going to skyrocket in terms of his worth as an asset. But if he goes to Rome, I think it'd be bizarre. It was Inter or us, wasn't it, for quite some time?
I don't know why. I mean, I don't know. It'd be interesting.
We'll see. Yeah, Jose can do funny things, I suppose. Addict Milan asks, what do you think of the chances of Adli, Pobega and Gabia stepping into the first squad? I mean, I presume by that he means, getting some minutes in the starting 11.
We didn't even mention Pobega, to be honest with you. We didn't. I thought he was solid. Didn't do anything particularly special, but I mean, it's difficult to tell from a midfielder, I think, especially in the way we play from a very limited time we've seen him, how he'll really fit in. But I can see Pobega definitely being a rotation player. I don't think I think he could perhaps start the odd game against sort of the lower division, lower ranked teams in the table at some points in the season, depending on injury. But no, I don't really see him starting. Gabia, you're probably best placed to talk about Gabia, because I know you like Gabia a lot.
I honestly think that he might leave.
Really?
That's where I'm heading at the moment. When we get that other centre back in,
it depends.
Is he really, now he's 22? Actually, he might be 23. I think he's 22. Is he really going to accept being fifth choice at that point in his career? He's at the time now where he needs to be starting for somebody. He needs to be, and I think, if Sampdoria want him, for example, I would be okay with sending him on loan there.
But would he necessarily be fifth choice though? Because have we definitely decided Kalulu's a centre back now? For example.
I mean, these are all questions that I'm sure that they'll have ideas in mind about. But I don't know. I'm just thinking more from the player's perspective. If he'll want another season where he's only ever going to start in an emergency, and he really does need regular game time at that age if he's going to kick on. But we'll see.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how Kier comes back as well, because I don't know. It's an interesting one. I could see him going, but I'd like him to stay. To be honest, I don't mind Kabir. I don't feel particularly bad when he plays. He's all right.
We'll do a final question then and wrap it up. Gregory Peck. Oh, it's a two-parter. First of all, which player do you think will be the standout for Milan this season? He thinks it'll be Adli. I think by standout, I think it'd be safe to presume means sort of like a breakout player, someone who does better than expected, maybe. So while Leao might be the best player again, who might be a surprise?
Well, it's not going to be Brahim Diaz, I can tell you that much. But
he's trying his best to bulk up, bless him, but
he is, but he's still got pushed off the ball so easily, bless him, in the Cologne game. But let's just if we get let's just say we get CDK. I don't want to tempt fate. I'm going to throw him in the bucket. I think he if he comes, I think he could be fantastic for us.
Mm-hmm. Tough one. Obviously, dependent on business that's done between now and the deadline. But I like Adli. Adli's a fairly solid shout based on what we've seen so far. I think Origi has the potential to be either a disappointment
unbelievable.
He's either going to.
I completely agree.
Set the league on fire like Tammy did. Coming somewhere where he's got more of a leading role, or his injuries are going to keep catching up with him. I
was speaking to my Liverpool mates about this, and they were all kind of agreeing with me in relation to Origi at Milan. Like, he's either going to get 5 or 6 goals and be a bit crap, or he'll get over 20, or do some madness in the Champions League groups for us, or something like that. So let's hope it's the latter.
Yes, and the second part of the question is, when was the last time you guys had a hangover, and what's the best hangover cure you have? That's a good one to end on.
It is.
The answer to that is today.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I was in Birmingham all day yesterday. The 2020 cricket finals, they do 2 semis and a final on the day, and Yorkshire got there, so went, and it's pretty early start that, 11 o'clock on the Amber Nectar, and we ended up out until about 1 a.m. in a Wetherspoons in Birmingham. So woke up this morning, bit of a dusty head, it'd be fair to say, and then a nice packed train back to London in the heat. Yeah, that really did. And the answer to that, the cure is Lucozade. Not the fizzy Lucozade, but the sports drinks.
Yes,
they just ram you full of everything that when you're dehydrated, you lose, I suppose. Some people swear by like a really good bacon sandwich and stuff like that. I'm not a massive eater, to be honest, when I'm totally out for the count. But a cold sugary drink of some description is fine.
Yeah, me was it was a few days ago, coming back last night on my lad's holiday in Greece. We had a lot of beer just left, and you don't waste beer, that. No. You buy it, you just consume it, and so we consumed it. Stayed up far too late playing. I don't know if you played Monopoly Deal, fantastic card game.
Yes, yeah.
Really, really good. So played that for far too long, and was in the airport hungover the following morning, and just had orange juice. That's my go-to, freshly squeezed ice cold orange juice. Again, sugary drink. But if I'm really hungover, like insanely hungover to the point where I can't function, I just get Diarrhea. You know what you get when you have diarrhea?
Yeah.
That, because it has all the stuff, electrolytes, everything you need in
there.
Yes,
that's the word I was for, electrolytes.
Yeah, that's usually
that's just prompted me. Baroccas or other dissolvable tablets in the water.
Effervescers is
that's
good.
The word that they use as well. Effervescent tablet drink. That might be the podcast title. Effervescent tablet. No, I think those are actually pretty good. I mean, the price, you'd think they could well be a con, but no, I've had...
even if it's a placebo, it bloody well works. I don't care.
So we'll wrap it up there. again, thank you to Adam for joining us earlier. We hope that you enjoyed his insight on to being a commentator on the best league in the world. And what I forgot to say? Yeah, merchandise. Check out our merchandise. We've had some orders in since we mentioned it last week. So thank you to everybody who's bought the new Scudetto design. And yeah, you can find details about that in the description if you watch it on YouTube, or it's on our pinned tweet. There's various places you can check out the store. And yeah, follow me on Twitter at Ollie Fisher. Lorenzo, thank you very much for joining.
No, thank you for having me on. Yeah, if you want to give me a follow, it's at Lorenzo R Giorgio, and just really excited for the season to start. To be honest, can't come close.
Thank you to everyone who made it this far, and we will catch you in a week's time.
Eccolo Ante in area di rigore, Ante, Ibra, gol! Vediamo se è buono, ce lo dà buono,